Welcome to STEM Stories with Mr. Ewing. Welcome to session 7 on our work on understanding our brain. And I guess you're probably asking, all right, what about my brain? Oh, all of this work is about my brain and it's about your brain. So what does it all mean for you? Well, we're going to go kind of do a quick review or a review of everything that we've learned so far. And then in session 8, we're actually going to put it all together. So we've learned a lot about the interior of our brain, all the different parts, the different components, and what they all do for us. And they're all super important. But when it comes down to learning, and that may be in the classroom or outside the classroom, the 3 most important parts that we think about are our hippocampus, which helps us store those long-term memories. Once we have made a memory of learning or understanding something, that's where it goes. And that's where it's stored. So once it's in there, we don't lose it unless there's accidents or sometimes disease. Very rarely do we lose that part of our long-term memory. And then there's the front part of our brain. So you know when people are saying they're thinking and they point to their head like this? Well, there's a reason for it, because that's where all our thinking happens, in the frontal lobe. That's where we learn to plan. That's how we pay attention. That's how we get to move our specific body parts. And most importantly, it's the prefrontal lobe. That's the most important part of the frontal lobe. That is the key component for learning. And then we learned about the fireman, our myelin sheath that grows around the axon that actually controls our neurons. Remember, if it doesn't have the myelin sheath, our neurons are doing all this crazy stuff. Myelin's like our fireman that holds that hose tight to make sure our neurons are firing properly. And we develop myelin. We always are developing myelin as we're learning. The more we learn, the more the myelin sheath we develop. And we can also remember, we'll talk about this in a little bit, that even though we've learned something, we can always unlearn it and relearn it. And then we've got the amygdala. Now remember, amygdala is that great place where all the information goes into our brain, and that amygdala pushes it out to where it needs to go. But we also know that the amygdala is the reason that sometimes when we're frightened or we're fearful or we don't like a situation or we're struggling, we go into flight, freeze, or fight mode. And we also learned that we can actually reprogram our amygdala to keep it from going into amygdala hijack. We don't want it to go into amygdala hijack. And sometimes we have to relearn and develop new myelin to learn how to deal or actually understand our own brain and work with it. And then, this is my favorite part, the hormones that our brain releases. The most important ones are dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. All of them make us feel really, really good. And when we're learning things, yeah, sometimes we don't have those hormones releasing in our brains because we're struggling. But when we get to that point where it starts to make sense and all of a sudden we feel really good, that's because we're releasing dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. But we can actually program our brain by looking at some pictures that make us super happy. And maybe it's a picture of your family or your favorite toy, or like for me, I still have my teddy bear from when I was a little kid. And when I pick that teddy bear up, I release a ton of dopamine and oxytocin. And that actually prepares my brain to actually want to learn. It's a really cool trick, especially to get us out of amygdala hijack. Now remember, pictures of our brains with hands, feet, and eyes is not accurate. Our brain does not have eyes, hands, and feet. So I use them for illustration purposes, but they are not scientifically correct. But we know, or we learned about neuroplasticity. Our brain is like a muscle, although it's an organ, not a muscle, and it's moldable, and we can change the way our brain works. So if we're used to going into amygdala hijack, especially at school, we can actually learn things to create new myelin to react and act differently. We actually have control over our brain, even though our brain does a lot of things that we don't know it's doing, like making our food digest and making us breathe and our heartbeat. Well, we can also help tell the brain to do things that we want. And remember, there's no such thing as a bad brain. Nobody has a bad brain, just like nobody's a bad person. All right? But sometimes we need to help our brain because we've learned things, we've created certain myelin that makes us think a certain way, and we just got to rethink our thinking. And one of the ways we learn that is once we've learned something, we can unlearn it. We pull that learning apart and relearn it by putting it together differently and making our brain stronger. Now, we can't work our brain like a muscle. We don't make our brain stronger in that way, but we can make our brain stronger by using the tools that we learn to actually control our brain so that we can actually have control over our own bodies. And that sometimes takes practice and some learning. And one of the ways we did learn that is through our 5 easy steps of brain hypnosis. And you can actually use this to change a behavior. And it's really simple. It doesn't cost anything. All it takes is about maybe 5 minutes. And maybe that's the way you start your day. Or maybe you teach your teacher about the steps and they incorporate that into the classroom. That would be amazing. And then one of the most important things we learned about is sleep. You know, we hear about it all the time, but we learned why sleep is so important for our brain. And there's some really big side effects of not getting enough sleep, or what we call sleep deprivation. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're actually punishing your body, and your body's going to be doing things that you don't actually get control over because your brain is tired. One of the most important things is, in order to have a great day at school or anywhere that you're at, your brain has to be rested. And your brain actually isn't going to develop the way it needs to if you're not getting enough sleep. And I know you're probably thinking, Mr. Ewing, I can't sleep 9 hours at night. Yeah, you can. And you probably need to do it more often. I know I do. And remember, one of the most important side effects of having a healthy, rested brain, you look better. Who doesn't want to look their best? And by doing that, you're going to need to get some sleep. It also helps you perform and feel great, and you'll learn more, and actually you'll have more fun during the day if your brain is rested. And then we learned about soft skills. And you guys, if you're in my class or you're here, you know that I'm super big on helping students develop these soft skills. And maybe some people see that as me being a really tough teacher, or that I'm coming down hard on a particular student or students. It's mainly because I want to see you be successful. And I want to make sure that you create these soft skills. One of the most important soft skill that you can develop in school is that when you walk into a classroom, you sit down and you're ready to go. Don't sit around and wait for your teacher to tell you to pay attention or sit down or it's time to get going. Sit down and be ready to go. That's part of taking responsibility. But listening skills, self-control, that falls into self-control. Being positive, having empathy for other students and the students and surrounding around you. I love this last one down there, a sense of humor. Mr. Ewing loves to have a sense of humor. I know when it's time to be serious, but I also like to have fun while I'm learning. And here's one of the most important reasons we need to develop those soft skills, and that's why it's so critically important for me to help you develop those soft skills. I can teach you them, but you have to embrace them. And I love this, that 92% of the people that hire new employees say that soft skills are actually more important than hard skills. Hard skills, remember, those things that we can actually learn in school, like math and science, and things that we can actually say, I know how to do this. This is a skill that I have because you've learned it or you've practiced it. But those soft skills are super important too. And then I love that almost 90% of recruiters, people that hire, say that people that they had to let go from positions, it's usually because they don't have those soft skills. And soft skills are super important on how we interact with other people we work with. There's almost very few jobs that you might have in the world that isn't going to require you to work with other people. So soft skills are crazy important. And if you've got them, if you master them, you will blow your job out of the water. You will do so well in life by having those soft skills. You need those hard skills, but you need those soft skills actually more than you do the others. So what does that mean for us? We got to be able to put all these pieces together. And I'm not saying you have to do it right now, but take a small piece of those and start to understand how that brain of yours is working and what we can do to help our brain work better. Because the better our brain works, the better we are, and the better you are going to be in life and more successful. It is super important that we work on all these parts of our brain, because you can do this. We can do this, and you got this.